Whether we're talking about a remake, a lookalike, or a distant cousin, industrial designers are constantly referencing and repurposing ideas when designing new products. Today, we're going to dig into the different ways industrial designers copy, and one instance when it's encouraged to steal. If we haven't met before, my name is Morna. I'm an industrial designer here in Toronto, and let's get into this video. Now, copying can seem like a paradox because it generates contradictory opinions. On one hand, if a design has literally been replicated from another designer, it can seem like stealing. Whether it is or not really depends A, on the law, but B, more likely, it's the court of public opinion on a social media platform. Copying in this sense is viewed as a form of plagiarism that hinders the development of original work. On the other hand, copying as a starting point or as inspiration can really serve as a catalyst for progress. It allows designers to learn from established designs, adapt them to new contexts, and really build upon existing knowledge. In this sense, copying can lead to innovation, evolution, and the creation of something novel. The homage is a way for industrial designers to acknowledge and pay respect to great design from the past. It's a way to carry forward details and elements of a design that have made the most impact on a designer. I've always admired this folding stool, and every time I see it, especially that twist detail, I just think it's so incredible, yet so simple. But then I came across the propeller stool, and it kind of blew my mind, because check out that twisted leg detail. Apparently, the designer, Care Clint, was also an educator. And guess who his student was? Yep, it was Paul Kerholm. I think it's really neat to see the historical lineage and how a detail has been passed from teacher to student, but it's also really cool to see how an idea can translate from one material to another. When Ice Cube was creating the ad poster for the documentary he made on the Eames house, he took an old Eames ad and remade it with himself in the photo, sitting on the same chair as the original ad. With this one photo, he added his own image to the Eames universe in a way that would be familiar to Eames fans. And if this sounds like an unlikely pairing, before doing rap music, Ice Cube actually studied architectural drafting. Now, remakes are a popular method of copying for good reasons. Remakes blend what we're familiar with and add a fresh spin. They're popular because they offer a built-in audience of fans. In the entertainment industry, studios see remakes as a safer bet because fans will go to see the remake either out of nostalgia or curiosity. Design is no exception. There are plenty of designers who remake a product based on a version they have used in the past. Jasper Morrison said that he had a corkscrew just like this for 20 years. He explained that even though it was an old typology, he felt it was his duty to reintroduce it to the world. Recently, I read the book Steal Like an Artist, and I came across this chart that outlines good versus bad theft. And it makes sense, especially this idea that good theft is copying from many sources, whereas bad theft is copying from a single source. However, there is a very different way of looking at copying. Back in 1977, there was a whole art movement that questioned this very idea. It was called appropriation. In the words of Janice Kearney, appropriation can be understood as the practice of using others' images, works, or words inappropriately. What was original about these works was that they did not display a conventional form of invention. It's kind of like when Jasper Morrison transformed these flower pots into the base of a table. As the story goes, his belief at the time was that good ideas were found on the street and not on a sheet of paper. He stumbled upon a stack of flower pots neatly organized by size and saw their potential as a table base. Now, it's important to note that this was long before the term appropriation took on negative connotation. But what's really cool about this appropriation movement was that it questioned the very ideas of originality and authorship. And as Janice points out, works created by a single author may seem to exist in isolation without any prior context or history. Appropriated images or works can carry traces of their origins, and these images have their own stories, and when they're repurposed, a new story is told. Appropriation happens in other disciplines too. Just like in the Eames documentary, Ice Cube compared how the Eames house was constructed to how hip-hop is made. He talked about how their house was put together using pre-made windows and prefab walls that all came together on site super quick in a few days. Essentially taking pre-made elements and remixing them into a house. He likened this method to how hip-hop is constructed by sampling pre-made music. I saw this documentary on Alvar Aalto, and it suggested he was heavily influenced by the artist Hans Arp, which was really surprising to me. But then I had to remind myself, it's easy to imagine that the designers we hold in high regard are somehow lone geniuses working away in a tower somewhere. But the reality is that everyone, even great designers, are influenced creatively.
Some people might really resist copying for fear of being labeled the copycat. But that unwillingness to copy can really stifle your creativity.
Because it prevents experimentation. I wasn't able to watch the documentary to confirm all the details, but looking at their work side by side, there is a definite similarity.
Copying is one of the best ways to learn any craft. For example, copywriters, they're encouraged to literally hand copy great ad copy. Athletes study how their idols move and play the game when watching game recordings. When I studied visual art, one of the first things that you learn, and when you're learning about great artists, is that with each of them, their process, their journey to becoming a great artist involved going to museums and copying from the masters that came before them. And it wasn't a form of plagiarism, it was a form of study, a form of analysis to discover what makes this artwork great. And the MoMA actually carries this tradition online now. So if you've ever wanted to learn how to paint like Jackson Pollock or Agnes Martin, you can take free courses that teach you exactly how to paint like them to learn about what made their artwork great.
Copying as a means of self-discovery for an industrial designer is kind of like trying on clothes. You need to see what suits your nature and personality.
Yohji Yamamoto has this quote that goes, copy, 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 and at the end of the copy, you're going to find yourself. What I love about this quote is that it really encourages us to spend time with the things that we are attracted to. When I was an art student, I had a really amazing teacher, Andy Patton, and he really encouraged us to lean into and really follow the artwork that we were attracted to, because everyone is different. Everyone's going to be attracted, whether we're talking about design or art, everyone is going to be attracted to different things, but you should lean into the things that you're attracted to. And then the next step of that was to practice copying. And for me, it was copying this artist called Donald Judd, because I had no way, his artwork always stood out to me, but I had no way, no vocabulary of talking about it. And that it just seemed like it was impactful, but I didn't know why. And so I thought that, okay, if I make some kind of work, it will help me understand it. But in my experience, copying actually led to the most original work that I produced in art school.
There's one aspect of design that designers are strongly encouraged to steal. And in this instance, when I say steal, I mean taking something and not really changing it in a new design. A perfect example is the story between these two thermostats. There are many similarities between them. In both cases, before they came to market, the standard thermostat looked like this. Now, this all changed when the original Honeywell thermostat came to market. And as the story goes, Henry Dreyfuss was frustrated with trying to get a thermostat to be square on the wall. His response? Change the form. A circle doesn't need to be level, but it also offered a new way to interact with the controls, because the whole product becomes like a dial, suggesting rotation. Dreyfuss instilled a clarity of purpose between what the product looked like and how it's used. Now, this isn't a surprise from the designer who wrote the book on ergonomics. Looking at these two devices, can you spot what Nest stole from the Honeywell? Well, if you guessed a good and familiar user experience, you got it. People have certain expectations about how products work based on their experiences with other products. When a design adopts elements from a good user experience, not only does it reduce the learning curve, it helps a product feel familiar and intuitive. Now, familiarity is a powerful feeling. Just like when you meet someone new and you feel like you've known them your whole life, familiarity is what makes us feel like we know how a product works. But it's also what makes people prefer one experience over another. And it's a concept called familiarity bias. It's a phenomenon in which people tend to prefer familiar options over unfamiliar ones, even if the unfamiliar options might be better. Another really interesting thing about Nest is the design adopts another strategy that I mentioned earlier, which is the remake. And as we know, remakes have built-in audiences and they can be nostalgic. And if you want people to feel something for your product, nostalgia is a trigger for emotion. When I first saw the Nest, it triggered memories of growing up in my childhood home, which was built in the 1800s with no insulation. So it was pretty cold in the wintertime. And so when my parents would go out and I was home alone, I would go and turn up the Honeywell thermostat. So what happens if you have a novel idea and want to protect it? Some people say it's better to be first to market. But if you've watched Dragon's Den or Shark's Tank, you probably noticed one of the first things that the dragons or sharks will ask is, do you have a patent? That's because patents can turn novel ideas into valuable assets. Now, when people say the word patent, typically they mean a utility patent, but there is another type, so it's good that you know the difference. Before I go any further, I should make some kind of disclaimer here because I'm definitely not a lawyer, so I cannot give legal advice. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. I just speak from my own experience. As I mentioned, there are two types of patents. One is a utility patent and the other is a design patent or an industrial design patent. The difference is a utility patent protects the way an article is used and works, while a design patent protects the way the article looks. Now, patents are good if number one is if you have the financial means to go after someone who is infringing on your patent. Number two is if your patent has done a good job of protecting your idea. So when you are developing a patent, you want to make sure that you're really thinking about, what are all the different ways you could approach this problem and write a good patent. Now, the reason I say this is because a number of times clients would come to us with their competitor's patent and they would say, okay, we want to design something that essentially achieves the same result as their product. How are we going to do this without infringing on their patent? So they would come to us to think of a different way of getting around the patent, essentially. And one such example is when we started on this project, which was a shopping cart. Patent search revealed there was an existing utility patent that described, the functionality and physicality of a shopping cart. Essentially, the patent lawyer gave us two directions. If you use one of those architectures, you will be fine you won't infringe on the other patent. And so we did that, and we ended up receiving our own patent for our design. So that's the video. If you feel like you've gotten something from this video, I always appreciate if you like the video or share it with someone. You can also subscribe to my channel, and that can help me out too. So till next time, we will see you later.